17-year-old Rudy Farias was reported missing by his mother in 2015, adding to a series of family tragedies. In 2011, Rudy witnessed his brother's death in a car accident, and in 2014, his father took his own life. When Rudy disappeared, it seemed like another misfortune had befallen the family. However, on June 29, 2023, Rudy was found alive. Investigators soon discovered that Rudy had never actually been missing. He had been living at home with his mother the entire time. He had even spoken to police over the years using a fake name. This case has raised many questions. Why did his mother report him missing? What was Rudy doing during those 8 years? Why did he use a false identity? And why did it take so long for the truth to come out? Rudolph Farias, known to everyone as Rudy, was born in Houston, Texas. He lived with his mother, Janie Santana, and his older brother Charles, who was from Janie's previous relationship. Janie had been married to another man for 10 years. Rudy's father, also named Rudolph Farias, was a veteran officer from the Houston police who remained distant, having another family with 5 more children. For Rudy, his older brother was a crucial figure in his upbringing. Rudy once shared on Facebook how important Charles was to him. He recounted how, during his time at school, he was often teased for being small and skinny. But whenever things got tough, Charles would step in to defend and protect him. Charles was more than just a brother. He was Rudy's best friend and father figure. However, Rudy sometimes felt a tinge of jealousy because Charles had a good relationship with his father, who often visited and took Charles out, bringing back cool toys or Happy Meal surprises from McDonald's. According to Rudy, Charles noticed his sadness and one day talked to him, acknowledging Rudy's hurt over not seeing his father. Charles promised he would always be there for Rudy and never abandon him. The brothers grew up inseparable, relying on each other under the strict and unstable supervision of their mother, Janie. To explain Janie's instability, judicial records show she had used at least 5 different surnames over the years, including Diaz, Rodriguez, Farias, and Ortega. The records also indicate that Jenny had been married several times, with at least one marriage annulled because one of her ex-partners claimed she was married to 2 other people simultaneously. She also had a history of minor criminal offenses, such as public disorder on November 22, 1994, inappropriate conduct with a loaded firearm in 1996, and driving without a license with a minor, presumed to be Rudy, in 2020. Additionally, she had been arrested for speeding and driving under the influence. Janie also created social media accounts on platforms like TikTok and Facebook, using photos that were not hers. According to different sources, Janie once stole pictures of a country singer to use on a fake profile. Despite the tumultuous household, there was always pride for the eldest son, Charles. He benefited from his father's financial support but remained humble and down to earth. Charles was an excellent brother, son, and student. He graduated from high school in 2007 and was accepted into the U.S. Marine Corps, with training set to begin on March 21, 2011. At 21, Charles dreamed of serving his country, but his life was tragically cut short in a motorcycle accident on February 13, 2011. Charles's sudden and tragic death profoundly impacted the family. Rudy, who was 13 at the time, expressed his grief on Facebook, detailing the events of that fateful day. He recounted how they woke up together that morning, and Charles asked Rudy to help him get the motorcycle out of the garage. After preparing, Charles left to meet friends, marking the last time Rudy saw his brother alive. A family friend called later that day to inform them that Charles had been in an accident and his body was lying on the pavement. Rudy and Janie rushed to the scene. Rudy recalled that at first he couldn't see his brother. Then he saw his mother on the ground, holding Charles and pleading with God to bring her son back. Rudy described how he froze, staring at his brother lifeless on the ground. This state of shock stayed with him for a long time. He told his loved ones that he found it difficult to even say the word death. He preferred to think that his brother had fallen asleep forever and often said he would soon meet Charles in heaven. At Charles's military funeral, Rudy delivered an emotional speech expressing how much he would miss his brother, who was the closest thing he had to a father. He shared that Charles taught him many things, but not how to live without him. The following years were tough for Janie and Rudy. The void left by Charles was a heavy burden to bear. Rudy began experiencing recurrent episodes of post-traumatic stress and depression. He even started self-harming, scratching his wrists with sharp objects like aluminum cans. On August 19, 2014, 3 years after his brother's death, Rudy received news that his father, aged 51, had also died tragically. The lifeless body of Rudy's father was found in his uniform inside his patrol car. He had parked in a secluded area outside Houston, where he decided to take his own life using his service weapon. The police report on the incident revealed that shortly before, he had been relieved of his duties pending an internal affairs investigation. Rudolph had been with the Houston Police Department since May 1993. A police spokesperson detailed that Rudolph was placed on administrative leave pending the investigation into criminal conduct allegations. The suspension meant he had no police duties and was assigned closely supervised desk work with little to no public contact. It is noteworthy that Rudolph was one of 4 officers under investigation for manipulating speeding tickets issued by the Houston Police Department's Traffic Enforcement Unit. There were instances, for example, of tickets being issued at the same time in different locations hundreds of miles apart. There were also questionable tickets issued late at night. Police sources explained that the motive behind these irregularities was to commit fraud to earn overtime pay. Records show that Rudolph earned $158,000 in overtime since 2012. Although Rudolph was an absent figure, his death affected Rudy, who once again expressed his feelings on Facebook. He thanked those who sent condolences for his father, even though he had never known him. Rudy acknowledged feeling pain because his father's death permanently closed any possibility of a father-son relationship. He confessed that he never expected to feel anything for his father, but in the end, he experienced pain, sadness, lethargy, and other confusing emotions. Amid the emotional turmoil on March 6, 2015, Rudy left his house around 6 p.m. to walk his 2 dogs in northwest Houston. A few hours later, one of the dogs returned home. The second dog came back the next morning, according to a police report. On March 7, 2015, Rudy's mother reported him missing. A missing persons flyer from that year noted that Rudy had been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and anxiety, and that he might have stopped taking his prescribed medication. The flyer described Rudy as having suffered a leg injury that caused a slight limp. Rudy's cousin told the New York Post that although Rudy was 17, his mental age was around 10. Some of Rudy's family speculated that he might have been kidnapped and sold into a human trafficking ring. 2 years after his disappearance in May 2017, authorities put up a billboard in North Houston to draw attention from local residents in hopes that someone might provide clues to find him. On March 22, 2015, a GoFundMe campaign was launched to help Janie in her search for her son, Rudy. At the time, she claimed Rudy had physical and mental disabilities. The campaign raised $2,025. In 2017, Janie told a news channel that detectives had informed her Rudy might have been kidnapped and sold to human traffickers. However, the case grew more perplexing as sightings of Rudy were reported between 2018 and 2022. In 2018, another of Rudy's cousins called Houston police, saying she had seen Rudy at Janie's house. However, when officers arrived, they found no sign of him. She also mentioned that her grandmother often said she talked to Rudy, but as she was elderly, her claims were not taken seriously. The grandmother insisted that Rudy walked around the house. During a 2020 dispute over the grandmother's guardianship, Janie's sisters accused her of forcing their mother to live in a poorly maintained house. They wanted to move the elderly woman to another home because the current one was so run down that she slept on the couch as there was no bed. Additionally, the sisters alleged that the house was filled with animal urine and feces, causing the grandmother to suffer from skin infections. Despite Janie's denials, the grandmother continued to tell the family she saw and spoke to Rudy. Around the same time, neighbors began reporting seeing a young man resembling Rudy entering and leaving Janie's house. A detective from the Houston Police Department's Missing Persons Unit said that when Janie was questioned about the young man visiting her house, she claimed he was her nephew, not her son. On June 29, 2023, around 10 p.m., a person found Rudy severely injured outside a church in southeast Houston. The young man had bruises all over his body, especially on his face. On July 3, 2023, Janie issued a statement thanking the media and the public for their support over the years. She announced that her son Rudy had been found after being missing for 8 years. Janie mentioned that she had no additional information at that moment but confirmed that Rudy was found unconscious and that the police and 911 were immediately notified. She assured everyone that Rudy was receiving the necessary care to overcome his trauma, but noted that he could not communicate verbally and requested privacy during this difficult time. Adding to the dramatic turn of events, Janie mentioned that Rudy was found clutching the chain his brother Charles used to wear around his neck. She later shared a photo of Rudy in a hospital bed. Rudy's aunts, however, disputed the authenticity of the photo, stating it was taken in 2012. On July 5, 2023, Rudy and his mother met with detectives from the Houston Police Department's Missing Persons Unit at a hotel. They were joined by Quanell X, a prominent activist and advisor for the local Black Panther movement. After the meeting, Quanell X told the media that Rudy had confided in him about experiencing oppressive practices and significant suffering over the past 8 years. He suggested that Janie should be investigated and possibly detained as Rudy, now 25, had endured uncomfortable situations implying a degree of intimacy, but did not label them as sexual in nature. Quanell X informed the press that Rudy had been found outside the church because he had taken his mother's car to escape, but ended up crashing it. He also mentioned that Rudy had been visiting neighbors under an alias. Following the press conference, Quanell X retracted his statements in an interview with The Independent, accusing the police of attempting a cover-up. He recommended providing Rudy with medical and psychological help. A video of Janie in front of her house surfaced on social media, where she expressed that she expected to be arrested. The video was recorded by local residents. On July 6, 2023, the police held their first press conference since Rudy was found. They confirmed that Rudy had returned home the day after being reported missing in 2015 and that his mother had misled the police by continuing to claim he was missing, asserting that the person seen by friends and family around the house was a nephew. The police explained that the district attorney had declined to press charges at that time since being missing is not a crime. That same day, Rudy's aunt reported that she had met with her nephew. She stated that Rudy was traumatized, did not want to be near his mother, and was staying with family friends. She called her sister Janie a pathological liar who had mistreated their mother, who had since passed away. She recalled how their late mother always insisted that Rudy was living in the house, only to be dismissed as lying by Janie. Learning that Rudy had been alive and controlled by his mother for 8 years, his cousin told a reporter that she felt more concern than relief. She found it disturbing that Janie had lied and hidden her adult son for 8 years for reasons that remained unclear. As more details of the case emerged, reporters found Janie's address and started arriving in her neighborhood. Janie became nervous and began offering money to residents, asking them to stay silent and not reveal that they had seen a young man entering and leaving the house when detectives and journalists arrived. Disturbed neighbors pointed out that the young man they now identify as Rudy had always been known to them as Dolph, Janie's nephew. Amid the media frenzy and the community's astonishment at the bizarre case, Janie's whereabouts remain unknown as she appears to have left her family home. A news media confirmed that activists and neighbors gathered on July 7th in front of Rudy's house in East Houston, demanding a thorough investigation by the district attorney and criminal charges against Rudy's mother. On July 13th, Rudy made his first public statements after spending 8 years hidden away due to his mother's actions, attracting worldwide attention. He explained how he stayed out of sight for so long out of obedience. Rudy agreed to the on-camera interview, but asked to have his face concealed because he felt overwhelmed by the attention his case had generated. He accused his mother, Janie, of brainwashing him, clarifying that he was never physically locked up or tied down. He could come and go as he pleased, but chose not to because she convinced him the world was a hostile place, and they could only survive by staying together at home. The police added that although Rudy was listed as a missing person, he and his mother interacted with officers using false names and birthdays to hide their identities. During the interview, Rudy described feeling trapped in his own home for years, likening it to living in a prison. He recounted how Janie would lock him in a room whenever family members visited. He could hear them chatting and laughing but could not join in. Rudy shared that he eventually began to yearn for freedom, to have a job, live a life, love someone, and be loved. He fought to understand his emotions. Janie manipulated him into believing he had to stay silent for his own good, bombarding him with negative thoughts that made him complicit in the charade. It was a form of mental imprisonment, Rudy explained, as he could work with his mother as a security guard and roam the neighborhood, but always under her watchful eye. Following his reappearance and contact with people who clarified the situation, Rudy said his relationship with his mother felt like Stockholm Syndrome. This psychological coping mechanism involves victims developing positive feelings towards their captor to survive. Rudy expressed that his mother had psychologically imprisoned him and wielded significant power over him as his sole parental figure since childhood, alongside his late brother. Despite answering all the reporters' questions about his false disappearance, some of Rudy's explanations still leave gaps. For instance, when asked if he ever questioned Janie about why they kept pretending he was missing, he said he did not remember. Regarding the allegations by activist Quinnell X about inappropriate advances by his mother, Rudy stated that the media had twisted his words. He mentioned occasionally sleeping with his mother but did not recall why, asserting it was not intimate, though he felt uncomfortable with it. Reporters also asked if his mother had ever drugged him. Rudy recalled an incident when he was about 12 years old and she gave him a bottle of Tylenol PM or sleeping pills. According to Rudy, his mother forced him to go to the hospital, making him pretend he was sick from an overdose. He couldn't remember why she did this, but suggested it might have been because she had something to do at school. He added that around the time of his supposed disappearance, he didn't know how to handle his emotions, especially since it happened right after his brother, Charles, passed away. When asked if his mother wanted him to take on a husband-like role at home, he said yes, but only in terms of shared responsibilities, like cooking and cleaning, with nothing romantic or intimate involved. Rudy told the reporters that he finally decided to leave home because he wanted to end the life he was living, where his mother kept him hidden, manipulated him, and made him believe the outside world was dangerous. When asked what message he would send to his mother if she saw the interview, Rudy replied that he wanted her to leave him alone and let him live his life and be happy. Throughout the interview, Rudy's tone was marked by anxiety and distress. In response to Rudy's shocking and unexpected revelations, his Aunt Pauline spoke to the media, expressing her deep concern for her nephew and noting that Rudy was still scared. Janie's whereabouts remain unknown, but it's possible she will face legal action from GoFundMe for benefiting from the false disappearance story. The fundraising platform stated that she had been permanently banned from GoFundMe and future beneficiary opportunities after the scam came to light. GoFundMe has a zero-tolerance policy for misuse of the platform and cooperates with police investigations into alleged misconduct. The GoFundMe campaign claimed Janie was a single mother who lost her eldest son in 2011 and Rudy's father in 2014. She needed financial help as she couldn't work due to dedicating herself to searching for her missing son. Consequently, bills were piling up, and her health had deteriorated mentally, physically, and emotionally. Brenda Paradise, a private investigator who worked on the case, believes resources were misused in the search for Rudy. Brenda is part of the non-profit organization We Help the Missing. She mentioned that volunteers searched wooded areas and made exhaustive efforts to find Rudy. She shared some of her audio notes from 2015, where Janie accused a gang of Mexicans of kidnapping her son, but this alleged group never contacted her. Brenda has not ruled out filing a lawsuit for the expenses incurred by the association during Rudy's 8-year disappearance. Rudy's case highlights the vulnerability of minors under negligent or abusive parents. In 2018, approximately 9.2 out of every 1,000 children in the United States were subjected to some form of maltreatment, according to the Children's Bureau. Neglect is the most common form of maltreatment, present in 60% of cases, as reported by the same bureau. Neglect occurs when a parent or guardian fails to meet a child's basic needs, whether medical, educational, physical, or emotional. The combination of oppression and deprivation of liberty seen in Rudy's case is common in situations involving Stockholm Syndrome within controlling relationships. One way these feelings and thoughts develop is through cognitive dissonance, which explains how and why people change their ideas and opinions to endure situations that don't seem healthy, positive, or normal. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. In early April 2011, for the first time in years, the shutters of house number 55 on Boulevard Robert Schumann remained closed. This house, located in a residential neighborhood of Nantes, France, belonged to the Dupont de Ligonnès family. The family comprised Xavier, Agnès, and their 4 teenage children. The unusual silence around the usually lively home caught the neighbors' attention. Typically filled with the sounds of the children and their 2 dogs, the sudden quiet was alarming. Known for keeping their shutters open even when on vacation, the closed shutters prompted the neighbors to alert the local police, fearing something might have happened. During an initial inspection, the officers found no trace of the family. However, it was on the 5th inspection that they made a horrific discovery. Located in the western suburbs of Paris, Versailles is the birthplace of Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès, born on March 9, 1961. He was the eldest son of the French Count Bernard Hubert Dupont de Ligonnès and his wife Geneviève Thérèse Maître. In 1966, the family welcomed a daughter named Christine. When Bernard left his wife for a lover, Xavier assumed a leadership role within his family, taking care of his mother and sister Christine. Geneviève claimed to receive divine messages, which she recorded during automatic writing sessions, similar to a surrealist poet. Her peculiar beliefs evolved into sermons about an impending apocalypse, leading her to establish a cult named the Church of Philadelphia. The group included members of the aristocracy, whom Geneviève convinced were chosen to survive the apocalypse and partake in the world's renewal. Christine was designated by her mother to bear the Savior. According to Geneviève, the child would be a reincarnation of both Jesus and Satan, destined to bring salvation. Despite inheriting his father's noble title, Xavier showed little interest in French traditions, instead being fascinated by luxury, high-end cars, and eccentricities. He also admired the United States greatly. Geneviève funded Xavier's lavish lifestyle through significant contributions from cult members who were sworn to secrecy about their activities. In 1974, on the paradisiacal island of Bréhat, Xavier met Emmanuel Teneur. The 2 boys formed a deep bond of mutual understanding, which lasted throughout their lives. It is said that Emmanuel even confessed his love for Xavier at that time, but despite the rejection, their close friendship remained intact. 2 years later, Xavier met Agnès Hodange. The girl was born on November 9, 1962, in Neuilly-sur-Seine, just outside Paris. She stood out for her deep religious devotion. She worked as an assistant at the Blanche de Castille Catholic School in Nantes, where her responsibilities included teaching catechism. Although little is known about her family background, it is well documented that Xavier and Agnès developed a close relationship, leading to a passionate but brief romance before they went their separate ways. In 1990, Agnès gave birth to her first child, Arthur, from a casual relationship. Soon after, she and Xavier reunited, rekindled their love, and decided to marry. Xavier adopted Arthur as his own son. 2 years later, they welcomed their first son together, Thomas, the heir to the family name. To commemorate the occasion, Xavier chose Emmanuel as Thomas's godfather. Following Thomas, the couple had 2 more children, Anne and Benoit. The family of 6 seemed to embody the ideal family, with Xavier appearing as a loving father and the children excelling academically, suggesting a promising future. Agnes was dedicated to instilling her faith in her children, frequently taking them to Mass. Other parishioners saw her as kind but firm with her children. Around the year 2000, in line with their interests and preferences, Xavier moved his family to the United States. Xavier, a discreet, charismatic, and multilingual man, believed he could blend in seamlessly in the United States. However, this venture failed, leading to significant financial losses. Upon returning to France, he began accumulating substantial debts related to his professional activities, which were always somewhat ambiguous. Various investigations have described him as a salesman. According to French media reports, money troubles had been a significant concern for Xavier for several years. One of his failed ventures included an unusual scheme to import cars from the United States to France. He also started several small businesses, all of which saw limited success. These included a hotel and restaurant guide for sales representatives, a customer loyalty system for restaurants, an association called the French Federation of Commerce, and a discreet business where he was listed as the manager. The accounts for this last enterprise were minimal, and in 2003, he hired 6 salespeople. Xavier's work often took him away from home from Monday to Friday and brought in a meager income, around $4,200 annually in declared earnings. Gradually, financial issues began to strain his marriage, likely exacerbated by typical marital disagreements. In 2004, Agnes wrote extensively on a French forum, detailing the challenges she and her husband faced. Notably, she mentioned that he had once told her that a group death as a family wouldn't be catastrophic. By 2009, the increasing debts severely impacted their relationship, leading to a temporary separation. During this period, Xavier sent numerous letters blaming Agnes for the family's troubles and holding her responsible for their financial ruin. This emotional turmoil took a toll on Agnes, causing her to lose her appetite and struggle with insomnia. On numerous occasions, Xavier turned to his friend Emmanuel for assistance. Emmanuel, hailing from a wealthy family, had inherited a substantial fortune from his father. Despite his wealth, Emmanuel lived modestly in a small apartment. An enigmatic and somewhat eccentric individual, he never hesitated to lend Xavier significant sums of money. In addition to financial support, Emmanuel funded Xavier's travels and even co-signed for the house where Xavier eventually settled with his family in the late 2000s. Thanks to Emmanuel's generosity, the family resided in a chalet located in the suburbs at 55 Boulevard Robert Schumann, west of Nantes. Once settled, the neighbors quickly formed the impression that Agnes was bossy and less pleasant than her husband. Behind closed doors, Agnes faced a personal hell. She viewed Xavier as both too fragile and paradoxically too rigid, almost militaristic. An old-fashioned man, he played the head of the household but was emotionally distant, lacking tenderness and affection, and sometimes even abusive. Furthermore, Agnes confided in her friends from the Thursday prayer group about her fears of how Geneviève controlled Xavier. She described her mother-in-law as a mentally ill mystic and was deeply afraid. On January 20th, 2011, Bernard passed away. Given the disparity between his lifestyle and financial difficulties, Xavier hoped his father's death would result in an inheritance. However, he was in for a shock. Upon delving into his father's estate, he found nothing substantial. All that remained were a few papers, a rifle, a card, a ring, and some cash, which Xavier promptly took. Within hours of Bernard's death, Xavier withdrew cash using his father's card. On February 2nd, he acquired a firearms license, and by March 12th, he had purchased a silencer for the rifle. During this period, he also bought quicklime. He practiced shooting the rifle in his garden, aiming at a balloon on a stand. Emmanuel, who was visiting, tried the rifle and saw nothing suspicious. Xavier explained that the silencer was to avoid disturbing the neighbors. On Friday, April 1st, the two friends went to a shooting range together, where Bernard's inherited rifle was a focal point of interest. The following day, Emmanuel called Xavier 5 times and they spoke for nearly an hour. Investigation suggests that the horror began on Sunday, April 3rd. That night, Xavier, Agnes, and their children went to the movies and later enjoyed a pleasant evening dining at a restaurant. Everyone was present except for Thomas, who was studying at a Catholic university and lived in a nearby student hostel. After their night out, the family returned to their chalet where neighbors saw them and some family members even exchanged text messages with friends and acquaintances. Xavier messaged Christine, telling her about their dinner outing. The most accepted theory is that Xavier drugged his wife and children, waited until they were asleep, then shot them and buried them in the garden. He also did the same to the family's 2 Labrador dogs. Xavier's alibi was as macabre as his actions. On Monday morning, he began contacting people related to his family circle from as early as 6 a.m. He called Agnes's workplace to say she was sick and contacted the children's schools, claiming Arthur, Agnes's son from a previous relationship, had a motorcycle accident and that Anne and Benoit were ill. By midday, he sent a letter to the restaurant where Arthur worked, saying Arthur was resigning because his father had been transferred to Australia. He still had Thomas to deal with. On that same Monday, April 4th, Xavier contacted Thomas and had dinner with him at a restaurant near his university residence. After the meal, a tired Thomas returned to his room. The following day, Thomas received an urgent message from his father, claiming that Agnes had a bicycle accident and was in a mild coma at a hospital, prompting Thomas to travel immediately to Nantes. It is presumed that Xavier killed Thomas in the same manner as his siblings and mother. Later that evening, Emmanuel spoke with Xavier again, and this time they talked for just under 19 minutes. At midnight, a friend of Thomas received a message from him, stating he was home watching a movie with his father. Thomas was likely already dead by then. About an hour later, Xavier sent an email to Emmanuel, arranging to meet soon. Emmanuel replied, reminding Xavier that he had power of attorney and that the key was on the sailboat. Contrary to what one might expect, Xavier did not act discreetly. He went in and out of his house, even leaving a note on the door asking not to deliver any more mail. Instead of hiding, he withdrew cash from ATMs and his image was captured by security cameras. He paid with his credit cards at restaurants and stayed in hotels under his real name. As Xavier's perfect escape began, neighbors gradually noticed troubling signs. The once open windows of the chalet had been closed for days. The local children no longer saw the family's 4 children. The dogs' barking had ceased, and Agnes hadn't returned to work. It was as if the earth had swallowed them whole. Piecing together the clues, the concerned neighbors contacted the authorities. Upon arrival, officers found a nearly empty refrigerator with only a few jars of preserves. They discovered a still damp mop in the kitchen, a chess set on the living room table, and guitars on a sofa. It seemed the Dupont de Ligonnès family had vanished. The scene was eerie. Beds were stripped of sheets, picture frames were empty, and closets had missing clothes. In the midst of the mystery, on April 9th, a letter surfaced, sent to family and friends. It claimed that Xavier had been hired by the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration and that the family had to leave undercover as part of a witness protection program, explaining their sudden disappearance and lack of communication. Suspicion and worry grew among neighbors who felt there was something off about this story. Fearing for the family's lives, they urged authorities to investigate further. Meanwhile, Xavier embarked on a journey through southern France in his car. As the case gained media attention, more details from the past emerged. On April 15th, security cameras captured Xavier entering a small hotel near Cannes. He parked his car, took a bag, and disappeared into the nearby woods. This was the last confirmed sighting of him. Curiously, on that same day, Emmanuel called his mother, revealing long-held secrets. He was homosexual, alcoholic, and depressed. Responding to the neighbors' pleas and lack of leads, authorities revisited the family home. On April 21, 2011, a freshly disturbed patch of earth under a terrace caught an officer's attention. They soon uncovered a concrete slab and moments later made a grim discovery. The bodies of Agnes and her 4 children were found, wrapped in bags, each with 2 to 3 gunshot wounds and covered in religious symbols. They had been meticulously buried in burlap sacks with quicklime. The family's 2 Labradors were also found buried. Despite the thorough search, no traces of blood, fingerprints, or DNA were found. Xavier became the most wanted man in France, accused of the massacre. His face dominated the news, earning him titles such as the Most Wanted Man, the Nantes Killer, and the Face of Horror. Yet, it seemed he had mysteriously vanished from the face of the earth. The autopsy results of the 5 bodies revealed to authorities that they were dealing with a meticulously planned execution. Most of the bullets had been fired into the victims' heads. Additionally, traces of a sedative were found in the children, confirming the hypothesis that they were attacked while sleeping. A startling detail emerged regarding Agnes. In the master bedroom, investigators found a device she used to manage her sleep apnea, which had stopped functioning at precisely 3:27 a.m. on April 4th. Investigators speculated that Xavier might have hesitated to kill Thomas, as he was the heir to the family name. Due to the close bond between Xavier and Emmanuel, the latter was summoned by the authorities. Emmanuel appeared cooperative during these initial inquiries, expressing his belief that Xavier's disappearance was a sort of pilgrimage before committing suicide. When questioned about the rifle, Emmanuel initially denied knowledge of it. However, deeper investigation into his life revealed inconsistencies, and authorities soon realized that he was not entirely who he claimed to be. A significant development occurred 24 hours later. Just before noon, Nantes police searched Emmanuel's apartment. They confiscated his laptop, and Emmanuel then disclosed what he truly knew about Xavier's rifle. A subsequent examination of the hard drive uncovered extensive correspondence between Emmanuel and Xavier. These exchanges range from mundane to philosophical, with some emails adding a peculiar tone to their relationship. One email, sent in the early hours of April 6th, particularly caught the police's attention. These accumulated details led investigators to suspect that Emmanuel might have assisted in Xavier's escape. But Emmanuel was not the only suspect. Christine also drew the investigators' scrutiny. During their interviews, Christine and Geneviève were evasive, painting a superficial picture of Xavier and denying any knowledge of the Church of Philadelphia. Geneviève spoke about Xavier's childhood, but avoided uncomfortable topics such as the source of their income, and she outright denied the existence of the sect. However, The diligence of the investigative team paid off. They discovered a copy of a complaint filed years earlier by former sect members who had fled in fear after Christine proposed to have sex with all the men to conceive the chosen one. This revelation about the sect, which included wealthy members providing financial support, was crucial. Investigators believed this environment might have offered Xavier logistical and material assistance. As a result, all former members of the Church of Philadelphia were interrogated, and the police monitored the sect's followers, hoping to catch any slip-ups in conversation or email. Despite these efforts, no definitive leads emerged. Meanwhile, Xavier's cell phone records allowed authorities to trace his movements within the country. The last concrete trace of Xavier was a security recording from April 15th. Investigators speculated that he was carrying the weapon in his bag based on its shape. While everything suggested he might have committed suicide in the woods, the detectives were puzzled as exhaustive searches in the dense forest yielded no body or remains. This led to the theory that Xavier might have been picked up by a boat and taken to another country. Consequently, an international arrest warrant was issued. On May 4th, Nantes police contacted the National Center for Fisheries Monitoring to verify if Emmanuel or Xavier owned a motorboat or sailboat. They found nothing, although they knew the records might not be fully up to date. On May 9th, Emmanuel was summoned to the Nantes police station for another interview, which was, in fact, an interrogation. The police were now focused on finding a boat and identifying its captain. At this point, Emmanuel was unaware of the depth of the investigation or the suspicion surrounding him. When questioned about a reference to a sailboat, Emmanuel explained it as a coincidence. He revealed that he had given Xavier power of attorney to access his safe deposit box. Should anything happen to Emmanuel, the key was stored on a model sailboat in an apartment. The safe contained his will, and that was all. The police let Emmanuel go, feeling frustrated and empty-handed. Despite the coincidences, the investigation remained uncertain. At this stage, Emmanuel was seen merely as a witness. No arrests had been made, and the police debated the point of further interrogating him, though they decided to apply some pressure as he remained the most credible accomplice. A significant detail emerged when investigators reviewed all checks issued to Xavier's company. They found an unusual check for $4,200 signed by Emmanuel. The address on the check indicated a previously unknown account in Monaco. An immediate request for the account statements was sent, but Monaco's strict banking privacy laws meant the authorities there would only respond to their own regulatory agencies. On September 28th, 4 police officers visited Emmanuel's residence again. After long minutes, Emmanuel emerged, disoriented and in his underwear, barely able to confirm his identity. The sparse interior of his apartment was littered with empty alcohol bottles, reflecting a state of deep loneliness. Emmanuel had not received any letters or phone calls from his friend, and that was what tormented him. The police no longer saw him as a suspect but as a castaway, leading them to question if they were following the wrong lead. Xavier had become one of France's most wanted alleged murderers, possibly even globally. In 2015, a journalist claimed to have received a letter from Xavier stating he was alive. Handwriting, DNA, and fingerprint analyses were conducted, but the note did not yield any new information. On January 9, 2018, police raided a monastery in Roquebrune-sur-Argens after a tip-off about a monk resembling Xavier. After 2 hours of intense searching, they determined it was a case of mistaken identity. On January 18, 2019, Emmanuel died of a heart attack. That same year, authorities arrested a man they believed to be Xavier at Glasgow Airport in Scotland. Once again, it was a case of mistaken identity. Another theory suggested Xavier might be in South America, specifically Argentina, where his language skills and charisma could help him blend in. Years have passed, and the Church of Philadelphia has not only persisted, but has reportedly experienced a resurgence. This small, highly secretive group includes members who have been part of it for nearly 40 years, living as if withdrawn from the world. In the summer of 2019, two brothers raised within the sect filed new complaints against Christine and Genevieve. For 2 decades, these women have fervently preached that Xavier is alive, innocent, and hiding in the United States as part of a witness protection program. They claim everything written in the April 9th letter is pure fabrication. This might sound like denial, but it could also be a way to obscure certain truths. Since 2011, the case has been mired in speculation and false leads, sending authorities down endless labyrinths. The pressing question remains: will justice ever be served for Agnes and her children? Despite the bleak outlook, some believe that the truth will eventually come to light. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. In 2014, during a routine traffic stop in Smith County, Mississippi, an incredibly disturbing case came to light. The police were drawn to a truck due to a strong odor emanating from it. As the officer asked the driver for his paperwork, he observed that the man appeared anxious and confused. The vehicle reeked of decay, and upon further investigation, the driver was identified as 37-year-old Timothy Jones, Jr. The situation became even more concerning when the officers learned that Jones had 5 children. Yet, the truck was empty, containing only some clothing items. When asked about his children, Jones initially denied having any, then changed his story, claiming he had 3 children who were supposedly in South Carolina. This inconsistency raised suspicions, prompting the officer to detain Jones for further questioning. What they discovered rendered them speechless. Timothy Jones Jr. and Amber Kaiser, a divorced couple with 5 children all under the age of 9, Mara Grace, Elias Xavier, Natan Hayside, Gabriel Asher, and Elaine Marie. They lived in Lexington, South Carolina. When Amber met Timothy, she was drawn to his world and felt connected to him and his lifestyle. They were teenagers when they met and married very young. Timothy attended school in Mississippi while Amber focused on homemaking. From a young age, Timothy witnessed his mother's mental health deteriorate due to schizophrenia. She eventually required constant care and left home to work in intimate services, with his family telling Timothy she had simply gone far away and abandoned him. His father, Timothy Jones Sr., who was 20 at the time, moved with Timothy to his grandmother's house, where he was exposed to domestic violence, substance abuse, and alcohol. Despite his tough upbringing, Timothy showed a talent for numbers, solving math problems with ease, and could disassemble and reassemble computers to make them faster. He seemed to have a natural understanding of how machines worked. However, things changed when Timothy reached adolescence and began hearing voices at the age of 10. By middle school, he had started using drugs and drinking excessively. At 15, he suffered a traumatic brain injury in a car accident, which affected his frontal lobe, the brain area controlling impulses and linked to psychopathy in various studies. After the accident, Timothy's behavior became erratic and stubborn. He was also very jealous of his father, feeling that anyone who had a relationship with him took away his father's attention. Over time, Timothy believed his father didn't love him and feared he would end up abandoned. Despite his growing intelligence, his emotional development was stunted, leaving him with the mentality of a child and lacking common sense and empathy. After finishing high school, Timothy Jones Jr. dreamed of joining the elite U.S. Navy SEALs. His intelligence earned him a chance to study there, but he faced a major hurdle. He lacked athletic talent and discipline, lasting only a few weeks in training. Often found crying out of frustration, he struggled to keep up with the rigorous demands. This led to depression, and a subsequent drug test revealed substance abuse, resulting in his expulsion. In 2000, Timothy began associating with individuals involved in bad things. One day, the police found him in possession of illegal substances and discovered he had been writing checks in his father's name. The police warned Jones's father that he had to press charges against his son or face arrest himself. In 2001, Timothy Jones Jr. was sent to a labor camp in an Illinois state prison for a year. Upon release, he seemed transformed, having found religion as a guiding force in his life. He memorized significant portions of religious texts and aspired to live strictly by them. Jones met Amber, the mother of his children, while they both worked at an amusement park in Chicago. After some time, in 2004, he invited her to his Pentecostal church. Within weeks, they decided to marry, adhering to the church's expectation for immediate marriage. Amber was 19 and Timothy was 22. Soon, Amber realized the church's strictness. Women couldn't cut their hair, wear pants, makeup, or jewelry, and Timothy believed that women should be submissive to their husbands, be fruitful, and multiply. Timothy was deeply religious, dedicating himself entirely to the church. Many advised him against taking the Bible literally, but he remained steadfast. The young couple quickly had 3 children, Mara, Elias, and Natan, each born a year apart. With their growing family, they moved to Mississippi, where Timothy eventually graduated with highest honors from the state university, earning a degree in computer science and engineering. Timothy Jones Jr. managed all of this while being married, having children, and working various jobs. His family couldn't have been prouder. Tim was truly a remarkable genius with a promising future. Everything seemed to be going well for him. He landed a job as a computer chip manufacturer at Intel, which Amber saw as their ticket to a better life. After living in student housing in Mississippi, they dreamed of raising their 3 children in a bigger house and even considered hiring a nanny. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned. Tim chose to buy a rundown trailer on a dirt road in Red Bank because he dreamed of living on a farm. He bought animals to raise, and Amber stayed home with the kids and the animals in this isolated area. She didn't have a car or know how to drive. By 2012, the couple had 2 more children, and problems began to arise. Tim doubted the paternity of their youngest daughter, Elaine, and wanted Amber to homeschool the children, though she only had a high school education. Amber felt increasingly isolated with no family nearby and Tim's family in Mississippi. She felt inferior to her intelligent and educated husband. Tensions escalated when Tim accused Amber of having an affair with a neighbor. The marriage crumbled and they considered divorce. Tim didn't want Amber in the children's lives, so he visited a therapist and asked for a sworn statement for his divorce lawyer, claiming he was fit to raise the children alone. Amber, without a lawyer and unsure what to do, eventually decided it was best for the children to stay with their father, as she had nothing to offer, no job or education. Tim gained primary custody as the sole financial provider, and Amber was granted regular visitation rights. She left her husband and children. Mentally, Tim was losing control, anguished by his failed marriage. He began using drugs and drinking again, struggling with the voices in his head. He became easily angered over minor things, and Amber reported that he once beat her in front of their children until she lost consciousness. Unable to manage work and home, he hired a nanny service. Despite his condition, the first two nannies noted that his home was immaculate, and he was dedicated and attentive to his children. Later, he switched services and hired 17-year-old Crystal, who had a young daughter. The nanny soon became his lover, and Tim tried to indoctrinate her into his religion, insisting she adopt the church's customs, wearing long dresses, growing her hair out, and being subordinate to him. When she refused, their relationship deteriorated. Crystal later testified that Tim was extremely harsh with his children, making them stand on their toes for hours as he believed punishment was necessary for their sick bodies. She left after catching him trying to hit her young daughter. After Crystal left, Tim hired another nanny. She noticed a drastic change in Tim. His once clean home was now filled with trash and dirty clothes, and there were even cockroaches. Over time, Timothy Jones Jr. became increasingly violent, punishing his children daily. He developed the habit of feeding them only oatmeal throughout the day, limiting them to one meal. In August 2014, the nanny contacted South Carolina's social services to report the conditions in Tim's home. She described the lack of food and the physical abuse the children suffered. The abuse was so severe that the teachers at the elementary school, attended by the older children, had already reported it to the agency months earlier. The agency had previously required Jones to sign a written promise never to mistreat or hit his children again, as they often arrived at school with bruises. When asked about the injuries, the children said their father would grab them by the neck and slam them against the wall. On the afternoon of Thursday, August 28, 2014, Tim picked up his 3 older children from elementary school, then his 2 younger ones from the nanny. Around 7 p.m., Timothy got angry about some broken outlets in their mobile home. He questioned his 6-year-old son, Natan, about the damage. When Natan said he didn't know, Timothy forced Natan to do push-ups, squats, and other exercises before having him repeat the circuit over and over again. Whenever Natan would slow down, Timothy would whip him with a belt. While Natan was being punished, Amber, Tim's ex-wife, called to speak with her children. The calls were logged at 7 o'clock, 7:02, 7:05, and 7:09, until Timothy finally answered at 7:10. During the call, Natan told his mother about the punishment for the broken outlets, saying it was an accident. Enraged, Timothy ended the call, telling Amber to stop protecting the boy. After hours of torture, Natan was exhausted, dehydrated, and begging for it to end. He collapsed, putting an end to it all. Timothy carried him to bed and left him alone without water or aid. Phone records show that Amber tried to call back 8 more times. At 8:30, Timothy searched for an explicit scene from the movie American History on YouTube, despite knowing his son was already unresponsive. Around 1 a.m., Jones took his 8-year-old daughter, Mara, to a local convenience store to buy 10 packs of cigarettes. Upon returning home, he grabbed Mara and began to strangle her. Next, Timothy went to his 7-year-old son, Elias, and did the same thing. After that, he removed his belt and went to Gabriel, who was 2, and Elaine, who was 1. He placed the belt around their necks and pulled until they stopped breathing. Seeing that none of the children were moving, he took their sheets and blankets, wrapped them separately, and placed them in the back seat of his car. On Friday, August 29th, Jones's father called him at around 7:43 a.m., but there was no answer. At 9:36, the nanny called, and on her second attempt, Jones answered. She asked if he would be dropping the younger kids at daycare, and he told her not to worry, saying he would take them next week, mentioning that they were out and would return by Tuesday. That morning, he drove from place to place. Between noon and 2 p.m., he searched online for drugs out of state. At 12:17, Jones was near Alabama, and his grandmother called him multiple times, but he did not answer and continued to ignore her messages throughout the day, totaling 23 attempts. Between 3 and 5 p.m., Jones searched online for tobacco shops in Alabama and Mississippi and for camping sites in South Carolina. At 8:04 p.m., his location was recorded in Georgia. The next day, August 30th, his grandmother continued sending messages, asking why he wasn't responding to her calls. His phone's location was recorded in Red Bank, New Jersey. On August 31st at 10:08 a.m., Jones searched the internet for camping stores and RV parks in South Carolina landfills, Lexington County landfills, and animal services, in addition to 2 songs. At 4:54 p.m., the nanny texted Timothy Jones Jr. to remind him to bring diapers when he dropped off Gabriel and Elaine on Tuesday. An hour later, he replied, saying he had left South Carolina with the children to start fresh and asked her to clean the mobile home, offering her to take whatever she wanted from the belongings he left behind. His ex-wife called him at 7 p.m., but he did not answer. On September 1st, he was driving from place to place. The next morning at 10:35, he searched the internet for body in landfill, how to make muriatic acid, camping near Colombia, countries with no extradition laws, and facing legal problems, where should I run? Throughout the day, he received text messages from the nanny informing him she had cleaned the mobile home. His boss at Intel also messaged him, asking if he was coming to work. At around 6 p.m., Amber called, but he did not answer. On the morning of September 3rd, a co-worker called twice without getting a response. Later, Timothy was captured on surveillance video at a well-known store, buying a saw, muriatic acid, garbage bags, a 5-gallon bucket, and goggles. At 3:37 a.m., he searched online for Tim Jones's missing children. His location was recorded in Charleston, South Carolina. At 6:33 a.m. on September 4th, he was seen at a bank, depositing a check for $3,518. The next day, September 5th, his location was tracked to Louisville, Georgia. His phone was only turned on once that day. On the morning of September 6th, Jones placed the decomposing bodies of his children in black plastic garbage bags and left them in a clearing along a forest road in a rural area in Alabama. This was recorded at 9:14 a.m. The bodies had been in the back seat of Timothy Jones Jr.'s vehicle since August 29th. By 7 p.m. on September 6th, he was stopped at a traffic checkpoint in Smith County, Mississippi. A police officer approached the vehicle and noticed a putrid odor emanating from inside. Additionally, the carpet appeared to be stained with bleach, as if it had been recently cleaned. The sheriff requested Jones's identification and the car's registration. He observed that Jones seemed to be under the influence of drugs. Upon checking his information, the police officer found out he was wanted in South Carolina over a child welfare issue. When asked about his children's whereabouts, Jones first claimed he had no children, then said he had 3 children who were in South Carolina. The officers asked for the phone numbers of his father, grandmother, and ex-wife to verify the children's safety. After making the calls, they immediately arrested Jones. The police mentioned that as soon as Jones was placed in the patrol car, he became emotional and started telling the officers what he had done to the children. He explained that he felt a deep sorrow and angered because one of his sons was playing with an electrical outlet. He grabbed the boy by the neck and choked him until he passed out. After that, he did the same to his other son, using a belt because his hands were too large. When his eldest daughter walked in and saw what was happening, he grabbed her and choked her with his hands until she turned purple. In another account, Jones said that when he saw his son playing with the electrical outlet, he believed the boy was trying to harm him, which led him to kill his son. In an audio recording, investigators are heard discussing how Timothy Jones Jr. forced his 6-year-old son, Nathan, to do hours of physical exercises after the boy accidentally turned off the electrical outlets in the family's living room. Jones told investigators that he eventually sent Nathan to bed, only to find him dead later when he checked on him. When asked why he did it, Jones mentioned that he killed his children because he heard voices in his head and believed his children were conspiring against him. He also thought his children would be happier in heaven. During his days on the run, Jones traveled through the Southeast with the bodies of his 5 children under blankets in his car. He ultimately dumped their bodies in a remote forest in Alabama before being arrested by chance during a routine traffic stop in Mississippi. By September 9th, after giving his second statement, Tim claimed he didn't mean to do it. He said the punishment imposed on Nathan got out of hand, and when he went to the boy's room, he found him lifeless due to the strenuous exercises. Not knowing what to do, he decided to end the lives of all his children. The pathologist mentioned that after the autopsy, she couldn't definitively establish the cause of death. However, she suggested that Nathan might have been so weakened from the excessive exercise that it didn't take much force for his father to finish him off. Investigators questioned why Jones didn't call 911 if it was truly an accident. Instead, he tried to hide and dispose of his children. That same day, Tim agreed to lead investigators to the location where he had dumped the bodies. On September 10th, the remains of his 5 children were recovered. On September 11th, the evidence collected from Jones's car was turned over to South Carolina authorities. Among the items cataloged were family photos, children's clothing, drawings by the children, letters to the children written by their mother Timothy Jones's diploma from Mississippi State University, and Jones's passport. There were also handwritten notes by Timothy Jones Jr., which included to-do lists such as removing bodies, grinding bones into powder or small pieces, burning bodies, and items like camping supplies, gas, and muriatic acid. On September 13, 2014, Jones was admitted to a correctional institution and placed in a special cell, away from the general population. Since his incarceration, Jones has been evaluated by mental health professionals, including psychiatrists, clinical psychologists, and forensic experts. Opinions among these professionals varied. Some diagnosed him with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, schizoaffective disorder, or personality disorder, suggesting that his mental state at the time of the crime might have been worsened by drug use and the traumatic brain injury he suffered at 15, which could have contributed to an underlying psychosis. These theories were presented to the jury during the trial. However, other specialists argued that Tim was mentally competent and that his actions to conceal evidence, including his children, indicated that he knew he had done something morally and legally wrong. His internet search history further suggested he knew exactly what he was doing and what needed to be done. The prosecution argued that Tim cracked under the stress of a broken marriage and the demands of caring for 5 young children. According to his statements, the trigger for his actions was his wife's alleged infidelity with their neighbor at the time, who is now her husband. She testified that she never committed adultery and that her relationship with the neighbor began after her divorce. The trial took place in late May 2019, involving weeks of intense testimonies and evidence presented against Timothy. The crime is considered one of the worst murders in South Carolina's history. Mara's last words to her father were, "Daddy, I love you." When police searched the house after the crime, they found Natan's favorite toy from Toy Story, broken into pieces. Natan seemed to be the most severely punished, yet all testimonies agreed on one thing: the children loved their father. On June 13, 2019, after 2 hours of deliberation, Timothy Jones Jr. was sentenced to death. He is currently in solitary confinement at a correctional institution, wearing a green jumpsuit that identifies him as a death row inmate. This tragic case ended the lives of innocent children due to marital problems, with both the father and mother making irreversible mistakes. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.